A simple thorn tree holds one of England's strangest secrets. This is the story of the Holy Thorn of Glastonbury, a living legend rooted in myth and shrouded in mystery. By the end, you will understand how a single shrub became a national symbol, survived deliberate destruction, and sparked a debate that has lasted for 1,000 years. We will follow its journey from a saint's miraculous staff to a king's Christmas gift, and from a vandal's axe to a modern icon. Was this tree a divine sign planted by a follower of Jesus, or was it all an elaborate medieval hoax? The truth is tangled deeper than its own roots. What makes a simple tree so powerful that people would fight, die, and pray for it for centuries? The story truly begins with a man who witnessed the end and became the start of something new. Joseph of Arimathea is a figure who steps from the pages of the Bible into the mists of legend. In the Gospels, he is a wealthy and respected member of the Jewish council, a secret follower of Jesus who, after the crucifixion, boldly asks Pontius Pilate for the body. He provides his own new tomb, a rock-hewn chamber for the burial. This is the historical core, the man of substance and quiet courage, but in the centuries that followed, his story grew. Ancient texts and local traditions began to weave a grander narrative around him, suggesting he was not just a disciple, but perhaps even a relative of Jesus, a tin merchant who had traveled to Britain before. This sets the stage for the Glastonbury legend, a tale that would forever change a patch of English ground. It is said that years after the resurrection, Joseph, now an old man, was entrusted with a sacred mission. He gathered a small band of followers, some say including Mary Magdalene, and set sail across the treacherous sea, carrying with him precious relics, perhaps even the Holy Grail itself. Their journey ended when their boat drifted into the marshy waters of the Somerset Levels, coming to rest on a strange, pyramid-shaped hill rising from the wetlands, the ancient Isle of Avalon. Exhausted from their voyage, Joseph climbed this hill, which would later be called Wearyall Hill. Leaning on his walking staff, a simple wooden rod, he prayed. And then, in an act that was both practical and profoundly symbolic, he thrust that staff into the earth. According to the legend, the dry wood did not splinter. Instead, it took root. Overnight, it sprouted leaves, and by morning, it had burst into a cloud of delicate white blossoms. This was the first Glastonbury thorn, a tree that flowered not in spring, but at the holiest time of winter, Christmas. The miracle was multi-layered. First, it was a sign of divine approval, a living proof that this remote pagan island was chosen for a new beginning. Second, it created a direct physical link to the Passion of Christ. This was not just any tree, it was born from the staff of the man who had handled the body of Jesus. The ground of Glastonbury was now sanctified by that connection. And third, it established Christianity in Britain not through conquest or decree, but through a gentle, blooming miracle, long before St. Augustine arrived in Canterbury centuries later. In one symbolic gesture, Joseph had founded a church, consecrated the land, and planted a living relic that would watch over the site for a millennium. But from such a beautiful beginning, questions immediately take root. How did a local folktale transform into a national belief accepted by kings? The answer lies not in the soil, but in the ambitions of the men who tended the story. Yet the legend, for all its power, leaves no footprint in the earliest written records of the place. To understand how belief grew, we must listen to the silence as much as the song. The first major historian to tackle the story of Glastonbury Abbey was a monk named William of Malmesbury. In the early 12th century, around the year 1130, he was commissioned to write a history of the abbey, a work titled De Antiquitate Glastonensis Ecclesiae, on the antiquity of the Glastonbury Church. William was a meticulous scholar, keen to document the abbey's ancient and prestigious origins. He writes of its founding by early saints, of its venerable age, and he even recounts the story of Joseph of Arimathea's mission to Britain. But here is the fascinating gap. In all his detailed writing, William makes no mention whatsoever of a miraculous blooming thorn tree. For a historian so eager to prove the site's holiness, this is a deafening silence. It suggests that in the early 12th century, while the Joseph legend was circulating, the specific miracle of the staff taking root and flowering was either unknown, considered too fanciful, or perhaps was a local oral tradition not yet accepted into the official history. This silence is the first crack in the legend's historical foundation, a quiet space where faith and fact begin their long dance. That silence would not last. Within a century or two, the story blossoms fully into the written record. Later medieval chroniclers, like John of Glastonbury in the 14th century, weave the thorn firmly into the abbey's sacred tapestry. They describe the miracle with conviction. The tree, they explain, was no ordinary hawthorn. It was a unique variety, Crataegus monogyna Biflora, known for a breathtaking quirk of nature. While most trees sleep through the winter, this one awakened twice. It would produce a delicate cloud of white flowers around the darkest days of December, near Christmas, and then bloom again in the full flush of spring. To a medieval mind, this was not botany, it was theology made visible. The dual flowering was a perfect divine sign, a living memorial to the two pivotal moments in the Christian story. The winter bloom commemorated the birth of Jesus, a light in the darkness. The spring bloom echoed his resurrection, new life from the old wood. This biannual miracle transformed the thorn from a curious plant into an unparalleled object of pilgrimage. People would travel for miles through muddy winter roads just to witness a tree defying the seasons. It became a living clock ticking to a sacred rhythm, and its very existence was offered as proof that God had marked Glastonbury as a special place. But with such a powerful symbol now rooted in tradition, the Abbey's guardians faced a new challenge. How do you protect a living relic that grows on a windswept hill, vulnerable to both the elements and human envy? The answer would involve kings, politics, and a surprising act of botanical diplomacy. The thorn on Wearyall Hill was not just a symbol, it was a genuine botanical oddity. To understand its power, we must look past the legend and into the branches themselves. The tree is a specific cultivated variety of the common hawthorn, scientifically classified as Crataegus monogyna Biflora. Its most famous trait is right there in the name, Biflora, meaning two flowers. This variety has a fascinating, unpredictable habit. Under the right conditions, often during a mild spell in late December, it can produce a scattering of its delicate, white, mayflower-like blossoms. Then, like every other hawthorn, it will flower fully and reliably in May. This winter blooming is not magic in the supernatural sense, but it is a rare genetic quirk. Botanists note that certain hawthorn species from warmer Mediterranean climates possess this tendency, a biological holdover from milder ancestral homes. So the central question becomes, how did a tree with this southern characteristic take root in the damp, cool soil of Somerset? Science offers several plausible theories, each peeling back a layer of the mystery. The first possibility is a spontaneous genetic mutation. In a vast population of common hawthorns, one seedling might simply have been born different, carrying a gene that allowed it to respond to winter warmth. A local monk or farmer, noticing this strange tree flowering at Christmas, could have propagated it, seeing a divine sign in a natural accident. The second theory involves human travel. Could the original cutting or seeds have been brought to Britain from the Levant, the ancient Holy Land? Pilgrims, crusaders, or even Roman traders moving along ancient routes might have carried a prized winter-flowering specimen as a curiosity or a sacred souvenir. Planted in Glastonbury's unique microclimate, it thrived, and its origin story was slowly rewritten to match the holiness of its new home. The third idea is that it was always a local variant, selectively cultivated over generations by the abbey's gardeners to emphasize and stabilize its unusual blooming habit, turning a rare occurrence into a reliable spectacle. It is crucial to separate the tree's real biology from the myths that grew around it. The Glastonbury thorn is not the only hawthorn on earth that can flower in winter. A warm December can coax blossoms from ordinary trees in sheltered spots. What made this specific thorn legendary was its consistency and, more importantly, its context. Its location on the sacred Isle of Avalon, paired with the Joseph of Arimathea story, transformed a botanical curiosity into a divine clock. People did not just see a tree blooming, they witnessed a prophecy being fulfilled year after year. The legend gave meaning to the mutation, and the mutation gave proof to the legend. This deep entanglement of natural wonder and human belief is what truly made the thorn special. But a symbol this potent never exists in a peaceful vacuum. It becomes a target. The thorn's winter bloom was a wonder, but its true power came from the institution that sheltered it. To understand its place in history, you must see it not as a solitary tree on a hill, but as the glittering centerpiece of a vast, holy enterprise. That enterprise was Glastonbury Abbey. By the height of the Middle Ages, this monastery was not just a place of prayer, it was a colossal economic and spiritual powerhouse. Its land stretched across counties, its influence reached the royal court, and its wealth was staggering. It was, by many accounts, the single richest monastery in all of England. In such a place, every stone, every relic, every story had a purpose. The Holy Thorn was no exception. It served as the living heart of the abbey's most precious collection, its relics. While other monasteries displayed bones of saints or splinters of the true cross, Glastonbury could offer something no one else could, a living, breathing plant that performed a miracle twice a year. This made it the ultimate pilgrimage draw. Imagine the journey for a medieval believer. You travel for days, finally arriving at the great abbey gates. You see the magnificent church, you kneel before ancient altars, but then a monk guides you to the gardens or points up to Wearyall Hill. There, even in the frost of December, you see with your own eyes a tree in flower. It was a personal, undeniable encounter with the divine, far more immediate than a dusty bone in a jeweled box. This experience was the abbey's genius. The monks were masterful curators of their own legend. They actively promoted the story of Joseph of Arimathea, weaving it into guidebooks, painting it on walls, and telling it to every pilgrim and noble visitor. Why? The reasons were both spiritual and brilliantly practical. By linking their foundation to a figure from the Gospels, they pushed the origins of British Christianity back to the 1st century, long before St. Augustine arrived in Kent. This gave Glastonbury a prestige that outshone every other church in the land. They weren't just an old abbey, they were the first Christian church in England, planted by a man who knew Jesus. This apostolic connection was a trump card in medieval religious politics. It attracted not just pilgrims with their offerings, but also the patronage of kings. A monarch supporting Glastonbury wasn't just funding a monastery, he was aligning himself with the dawn of Christianity itself. The thorn was the living proof of that connection. So, while pilgrims saw a miracle, kings saw a symbol of legitimate, ancient authority. The tree's blossoms were, in a very real sense, a form of celestial currency, bringing wealth, power, and protection to the abbey walls. It was a perfect symbiotic relationship. The abbey gave the thorn its context and protection, and the thorn gave the abbey its unique, unassailable holiness. But such a valuable asset requires careful management. How do you ensure a living symbol survives, not just the winters, but the passing of centuries? The answer involves a surprising and delicate tradition, one that would carry a piece of Glastonbury right to the doorstep of the king. This celestial currency found its most eager customer in the English crown. For centuries, a deep and peculiar bond formed between the monarchy and the thorn. a relationship that would see the tree elevated from a monastic relic to a national treasure. The connection likely began in the medieval period with royal visits to the abbey's holy site. King Henry VIII himself is recorded as having visited Glastonbury in the 1530s, a pilgrimage that took place just a few short, fateful years before he would order the dissolution of all monasteries. That event in 1539 was a cataclysm for Glastonbury Abbey. The last abbot was executed on the tor, the magnificent buildings were stripped and left to ruin, and the vast estates were seized by the crown. In this wave of destruction, one might expect the Holy Thorn, that potent symbol of the old Catholic order, to have been chopped down and forgotten, yet it survived. Perhaps its location on Wearyall Hill, separate from the main abbey complex, spared it the immediate wrath of the king's commissioners, or perhaps its fame as a natural wonder, distinct from the monastic institution, allowed it to endure. Its survival through this violent rupture is the first clue to its enduring power, a power that would soon be redirected toward a new purpose, serving the monarchy itself. That purpose crystallized in the 17th century with the birth of a beautiful and enduring Christmas tradition. The practice began, most historians believe, during the reign of King James I. A local Glastonbury vicar, perhaps seeking to curry favor with the new Stuart king or to reinforce the town's unique identity, had a brilliant idea. He carefully cut a flowering sprig from the thorn during its winter bloom, packaged it with great care, and sent it to the royal court as a Christmas gift. It was a masterstroke. The gift was not gold or jewels, but something far more potent, a living piece of England's most ancient Christian legend, blooming defiantly in the dead of winter. For the king, it was a symbol of his realm's deep and sacred history. For Glastonbury, it was a lifeline, a way to remain connected to the seat of power through a shared, symbolic ritual. The monarchy accepted the gift, and a tradition was born. Over the decades, this act of botanical diplomacy solidified into an annual ritual, a Christmas ceremony as fixed as any court protocol. Each year, on the 8th of December, the town would gather. The mayor, the vicar, and other local dignitaries would process to the thorn tree on Wearyall Hill. There, with great solemnity, the choicest blossoming sprig would be carefully selected and cut. It was then placed in a protective case and began its journey to London, first by horse-drawn coach and later by train. Upon arrival, it was presented to the monarch in time for Christmas Day. The sprig would adorn the royal breakfast table, a fragile, white-flowered emblem of continuity and faith amidst the grandeur of the feast. This was no longer just a local custom, it was a state ceremony. The thorn had been officially adopted. In sending that sprig, Glastonbury was effectively reminding the crown, year after year, of the nation's mythical origins. And in accepting it, the monarchy was weaving that ancient Christian narrative into its own identity. The tree on a Somerset hill had become a silent participant in the pageantry of the British state. But traditions built on living things face a constant, quiet threat, not from kings or revolutions, but from a far more mundane and relentless force, the passage of time itself. Yet even this royal tradition could not shield the tree from the storm of history. In the 1640s, England tore itself apart in a brutal civil war, a conflict fought not just over politics and taxes, but over the very soul of the nation. On one side stood the royalists loyal to King Charles I and the established traditions of the Church of England. On the other stood the parliamentarians, led by Oliver Cromwell, whose ranks were filled with Puritans. To the Puritan mind, the Church of England was still riddled with the superstitions and idolatry of Catholicism. They saw ornate rituals, stained glass, and religious imagery as dangerous distractions from a pure, word-based faith. And in this worldview, the Glastonbury thorn was not a holy relic, it was a perfect symbol of everything they despised. A tree that people prayed to, a plant believed to have magical origins, a living object of pilgrimage that bloomed on a feast day. It represented the kind of mystical, nature-based piety they were determined to root out. The thorn, by its very existence, was an affront. The moment of its destruction is often pinned to a specific year, 1647, and a specific man. Local tradition names him as a Puritan soldier, sometimes identified as Colonel Richard Pine. Whether he acted under official orders or from personal zeal, the story remains starkly powerful. One day, this man marched up Wearyall Hill, not with pilgrims but with an axe. He did not see a centuries-old wonder, he saw an idol, and with deliberate, symbolic blows, he began to chop down the original Holy Thorn. The act was loaded with meaning. He was attacking the physical symbol of the old Catholic England that the Abbey represented. He was striking at a beloved emblem of the royalists who saw the thorn as part of the kingdom's ancient fabric. And most profoundly, he was attempting to kill a legend to prove that no divine hand would stay his axe. To the local people watching, it must have been a scene of profound horror and sacrilege. This was not just the loss of a famous tree, it was like witnessing the murder of a saint. The felling of the thorn was a martyrdom in its own right, a violent end for a silent, blooming witness to history. The stump was left as a stark, wounded monument on the hillside, a physical testament to the iconoclastic fury of the age. The message seemed clear: the old magic was dead, cut down by the new, austere reality. But legends, especially ones rooted so deeply in both soil and story, have a stubborn habit of returning. The axe had fallen, but the story was far from over. In the quiet years that followed the Civil War, a new whisper began to circulate among the people of Glastonbury. They spoke of a miracle not of blooming but of returning. For on that scarred and weathered stump up on Wearyall Hill, something impossible was happening. Green shoots, tender and defiant, were pushing their way up through the old, gnarled wood. To a community that had witnessed such a violent act of desecration, this was not mere regrowth. It was resurrection. The thorn was proving itself to be a true phoenix rising from its own ashes. This local belief, passed down through generations, transformed the tree from a passive relic into an active symbol of endurance. It seemed to say that faith, and the legends that carry it, could not be so easily erased by a single stroke of an axe. The physical resurgence of the plant mirrored the spiritual resilience of the community itself, binding the thorn's fate even more tightly to the identity of the town. Yet behind this powerful symbol of natural rebirth lay a far more practical, human form of preservation. The truth is, the original thorn's lineage likely never faced extinction. For centuries, the monks of Glastonbury Abbey had been expert horticulturalists. Understanding that their living relic was vulnerable to storms, disease, or exactly the kind of fanatical attack it eventually suffered, they had undertaken a quiet, ongoing project. They had taken cuttings and grafts from the revered tree, propagating its unique genetic code long before the Puritan soldier ever raised his blade. This was a form of sacred insurance. By the time of the felling, the Holy Thorn was no longer a single entity. It was a dynasty. These clone descendants were carefully planted in protected and significant locations throughout Glastonbury. One found a home within the very walls of the Abbey grounds, a direct replacement for pilgrims to venerate. Another was placed in the churchyard of St. John's Church in the heart of the town, bringing the legend into the daily life of the community. Others were established in private gardens and on other holy sites. This created a scattered yet connected network, a living clone army of the original miracle. If one tree was lost, the essence of the Holy Thorn lived on in another. This practice of propagation demystifies part of the legend while making it somehow more profound. It shows that the medieval monks were not just passive recipients of a miracle, they were its active stewards. They used the tools of agriculture to safeguard a spiritual inheritance, ensuring that the visible sign of their abbey's founding story would continue to flower season after season, regardless of the political or religious storms raging around it. The new tree that grew from the old stump on Wearyall Hill, then, was perhaps both a miraculous survivor and a deliberately planted successor, a blend of resilient nature and human devotion. This web of descendant trees created a new kind of problem, however. If the original is gone and many copies exist, how do you decide which one is truly authentic? The answer lies not in the roots but in the human hunger for a single, tangible object to believe in. This resilience was tested once more, not by religious reformers but by a senseless act in our own time. The Wearyall Hill you can visit today is a quiet, grassy slope with a stunning view of Glastonbury Tor, but the story of the tree standing there is a chapter of modern loss and stubborn hope. The thorn that grew for most of the 20th century was itself a descendant, planted with ceremony in 1951 to replace an earlier successor. For decades it flourished, a living landmark where tourists and pilgrims alike could touch a piece of the legend. It was more than a tree, it was a direct physical portal to a 1,000-year-old story. Then, on a December night in 2010, that connection was violently severed. Vandals attacked the tree, hacking at its branches and trunk. The damage was so severe that the local council, after a desperate attempt to save it, declared the tree dead. The stump was left in place, a haunting echo of the Puritan axe stroke from centuries before. The community was heartbroken and furious. Police investigated it as a possible religiously motivated hate crime, but no one was ever charged. In the face of this loss, the people of Glastonbury did what their ancestors had always done. They turned to the surviving network of clones. A new graft taken from one of the other holy thorns in town was carefully nurtured and in 2012 replanted on Wearyall Hill in a protective metal cage. For a while, it seemed the cycle of death and rebirth would continue. The new tree grew, a symbol of the legend's indomitable spirit. Then, in early 2023, history repeated itself with a brutal clarity. Once again, under cover of darkness, someone attacked the young tree. This time, they cut it down completely. The sight of the sawn stump inside its protective cage the next morning was a profound shock, a raw wound for the entire town. The public reaction was a mix of deep sadness, palpable anger, and weary resilience. The police launched another investigation, and local leaders spoke of the attack as an assault on the community's very heart. Why would someone do this not once but twice? The motives remain murky, ranging from misguided protest to sheer nihilism. Yet the response, as always, was to replant. New grafts from the ancient lineage were prepared, and plans were made to try again with even greater security. This relentless cycle of vandalism and regrowth tells us something crucial about the thorn's modern meaning. It is no longer just a medieval relic or a royal gift. It has become a modern battleground for a community's identity. Every attack proves how potent the symbol still is, how much power it holds to provoke. And every replanting is an act of defiance, a statement that the story is stronger than the chainsaw, that the community's memory will outlast any act of destruction. The physical tree may be fragile, but the idea of the holy thorn is now virtually unkillable, preserved in countless grafts, in local pride, and in the enduring human need for wonder. But if the tree itself is so vulnerable, where does its true power actually reside? Is it in the wood and the blossom, or in something far less tangible? The true legacy of the holy thorn was never confined to one lonely hill. To find it, you must walk the winding lanes of Glastonbury itself, where the legend has taken root in a quiet, living network across the town. This is a map written not on paper but in bark and blossom. The most prominent descendant stands within the very heart of the old story, the grounds of Glastonbury Abbey. Planted carefully near the ruins of the Lady Chapel, this thorn grows amidst the skeletal arches and fallen stones. For a pilgrim, the experience here is profoundly layered. You are touching a tree of the sacred lineage while standing in the shadow of the great church that championed its myth. It creates a powerful, tangible bridge between the living symbol and the monumental history it represents. The Abbey Thorn serves as a direct, accessible replacement for the original, allowing visitors to connect with the legend at its most famous physical source. A short walk from the Abbey gates brings you to another guardian of the story in the churchyard of St. John's Church. This is often considered the oldest and grandest of the surviving thorns. Its trunk is thick and gnarled, its branches sprawling with the weight of centuries. It feels ancient in a way the younger trees do not. Sheltered by the sturdy parish church, this tree integrates the legend into the daily rhythm of the town. It is not a ruin, but a living part of the community's present, blooming faithfully each winter beside graves and pathways. Here, the miraculous feels domestic and enduring, a quiet neighbor with an extraordinary secret. The search continues to the peaceful, red spring gardens of the Chalice Well. Nestled at the foot of the Tor, this site is steeped in its own lore of sacred waters and the Holy Grail. A holy thorn grows here too, a graft thoughtfully placed among the flowers and flowing wells. In this setting, the tree becomes part of a different tapestry of belief, one that often blends Christian legend with older ideas of earth mysteries and healing. For many visitors, the thorn at Chalice Well represents the unifying power of the symbol, a point where different strands of spiritual seeking intertwine. Beyond these public sites, the lineage disappears into private gardens and hidden corners. Local residents have cultivated their own grafts for generations, passing cuttings along like cherished heirlooms. This means the genetic essence of the original thorn, its unique flowering habit, is scattered in dozens of backyards across Somerset. You might never see them, but they are there, a silent, blooming congregation. This network serves a vital purpose. It decentralizes the sacred. No single act of vandalism can destroy the lineage because the legacy is no longer in one place. It is woven into the very fabric of the town. Each location offers a different flavor of encounter. The Abbey provides historical gravity, St. John's offers pastoral continuity, Chalice Well suggests mystical harmony, and the private gardens speak of personal, cherished devotion. Together, they form a sacred grove spanning the entire landscape, ensuring that whatever happens on Wearyall Hill, the legend of the Holy Thorn remains rooted, resilient, and in perpetual bloom. But what if the thorn's origin is even more direct and infinitely more painful? A rival legend whispers a far more audacious claim that the Glastonbury thorn is not merely descended from a saint's staff, but from the very instrument of Christ's torment. Some stories propose that the tree is a direct sign of the crown of thorns itself. This theory elevates the plant from a symbol of divine favor to a living relic of the Passion, a piece of the original suffering that took root in English soil. Imagine the potency of that belief. To stand before this tree would be to stand in the presence of the object that drew the blood of Jesus, a thought both horrifying and sacred. This idea likely emerged centuries after the Joseph legend, a competitive layer of sanctity added by storytellers or perhaps even monks seeking to outshine other European shrines. If your abbey has a tree grown from the staff of a disciple, that is impressive. But if it has a tree grown from the crown itself, that is unparalleled. It represents the ultimate spiritual one-upmanship, grafting the story directly onto the central moment of Christian sacrifice. The practical question, of course, is how. How could a fragment of the most famous relic in Christendom find its way to a marshy island in Somerset? The path, while speculative, follows a trail well worn by medieval relic lore. After the crucifixion, the fate of the crown of thorns is a history of its own, one of travel and political gift-giving. Historical records show it was venerated in Jerusalem for centuries before being transferred to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. In the 13th century, it was acquired by the French king Louis IX, who built the breathtaking Sainte-Chapelle in Paris specifically to house it. This documented journey proves that Passion relics moved across continents, often as diplomatic treasures or tokens of faith. the leap to Glastonbury requires a missing link, a story that a pilgrim, a crusading knight, or even a shadowy figure like Joseph himself might have carried a single sacred thorn from the crown to Britain. Perhaps it was embedded in a piece of wood or sealed in a reliquary, and like Joseph's staff, was planted and miraculously grew. The story fills the logistical gap with faith, creating a divine shortcut for the relic's arrival. This crown of thorns theory serves a different purpose than the staff legend. Joseph's story is about foundation, a gentle beginning for British Christianity. The crown story is about connection to the Passion itself, an unbroken physical lineage to the moment of crucifixion. One is a story of origin, the other a story of agony. Both, however, contribute to the thorn's overwhelming aura of divine suffering. Whether from the staff of the man who buried Jesus or from the crown that wounded him, the tree is forever stained with the echo of that Friday. It becomes a botanical witness, its biannual blooms not just commemorations but quiet resurrections of that sacred pain. This layering of legends doesn't weaken the thorn's mystery, it deepens it. Each story caters to a different hunger, for a pure origin or for a tangible touch of the sublime. Together, they weave a tapestry of belief so thick that the simple hawthorn disappears completely, leaving only a symbol that has absorbed 1,000 years of human longing. That same duality of nature and belief made the thorn a lightning rod in the great religious storms of Europe. When the Protestant Reformation swept across England, it brought with it a fierce new intellectual climate, one deeply suspicious of the very things the Glastonbury thorn represented. For reformers, miracles were not ongoing events in the natural world. They were confined to the apostolic age. Relics were not conduits of grace. They were often fraudulent tools used by a corrupt church to control the masses and extract wealth from pilgrims. The Holy Thorn, blooming on cue for Christmas, fit perfectly into their definition of a dangerous superstition. The great reformer John Calvin himself, in his seminal work A Treatise on Relics, launched a broadside against the entire medieval relic trade. He wrote scathingly of the absurd multiplication of objects, noting how every cathedral seemed to possess a piece of the true cross, enough wood to build a ship. While he did not mention the Glastonbury thorn by name, his logic directly targeted its kind. A tree that flowered in winter would have been seen not as a miracle, but as a clever monastic hoax, a botanical trick engineered to inspire awe and open purse strings. Later Anglican thinkers, inheriting this reformed skepticism, were often openly derisive to them. The legend of Joseph of Arimathea was a pious fable, and the thorn's biannual bloom was simply a curious natural phenomenon, unworthy of the theological weight heaped upon it. It became, in their eyes, a prime example of the magical thinking that the Reformation had sought to purge from true Christianity. This was not merely an academic debate, it was a fundamental clash of worldviews. In the Protestant framework, God spoke through Scripture alone, not through flowering trees. The thorn was demoted from a sacred sign to a symbol of everything that was wrong with the old faith, a charming but deceitful ornament on the rotten edifice of popery. Yet on the other side of this divide, within the enduring Catholic tradition and later in the High Church Anglican movement, the thorn found a powerful and enduring defense. Here, the worldview was incarnational. This is the belief that the divine does not remain separate from the material world, but enters into it, sanctifying matter itself. In this theology, God's grace can absolutely be mediated through physical objects, through water in baptism, bread in the Eucharist, or yes, through a unique tree on a hill. The thorn was not a fraud, but a sacrament of creation. It was a living testament to the idea that the natural world, since the incarnation of Christ, could become a window into the supernatural. Its winter bloom was a perfect emblem of this, a flash of divine life in the dead of winter, echoing the light of Christ entering the darkness of the world. For these believers, the legend of Joseph was not a fact to be dissected by historians, but a truth to be received through tradition, a story that conveyed a deeper spiritual reality about the holiness of that place. The thorn was a focus for devotion, a thing of beauty that pointed beyond itself. It encouraged a sense of wonder and embodied the hope of resurrection in a way a doctrinal statement alone never could. In this way, the tiny ecosystem of Glastonbury became a microcosm of the titanic struggle that shaped Britain. The fight over the thorn's meaning was the fight over the soul of the nation itself, a battle between a word-centered faith and a symbol-rich tradition, between skepticism and wonder, between a God who spoke only from a book and a God who might still whisper through the petals of a flower. This conflict was never fully resolved. It simply settled into a quiet, enduring tension, one that would leave the thorn standing but forever changed in the eyes of those who looked upon it. This tension between faith and fact finds a perfect echo in another legend rooted in the same ground. The mists of Avalon have always swirled around Glastonbury Tor. Long before the monks built their abbey, this strange hill rising from the marshes was a place of deep Celtic myth, a gateway to the otherworld. It was here, in the fertile soil of pagan belief, that the story of King Arthur found one of its most enduring homes. Medieval writers, seeking a tangible location for the mythical Isle of Avalon, looked at the isolated pyramid-shaped tor surrounded by water and saw it immediately. Glastonbury was Avalon, the magical island where the wounded Arthur was taken after his final battle, to be healed and to sleep until Britain's hour of greatest need. This identification was a masterstroke of cultural absorption. The Christian monastery did not erase the older legend, it embraced and claimed it. And then, in a moment of breathtaking theatricality, the monks provided proof. In the year 1191, a fire devastated the abbey church. During the rebuilding, the monks made a stunning announcement. They had discovered, deep in the ancient cemetery, a massive hollowed-out oak log containing two skeletons. One was a giant of a man, his skull bearing terrible wounds. The other was a slender woman. With them was a lead cross bearing a Latin inscription. It read, "Here lies buried the renowned King Arthur in the Isle of Avalon." The tomb of Arthur and Guinevere had been found. Today, most historians view this as a magnificent, calculated fraud. The fire had crippled the abbey's finances. What better way to attract pilgrims, donations, and royal favor than to unearth the greatest hero of British lore right in your own graveyard? It was a publicity stunt of genius, creating a pilgrimage destination to rival Canterbury. The thorn is woven into this grand deception, or perhaps this grand storytelling, in a subtle but profound way. The legend of Joseph of Arimathea predates Arthur. By claiming the holy man sanctified the island centuries before the king was even born, the monks created a sacred timeline. First came Joseph and his flowering staff, founding Christianity. Then, generations later, the greatest Christian king of the Britons, Arthur, is laid to rest in that already hallowed earth. The thorn thus becomes the original marker, the first sign of holiness that makes the entire site worthy of being a hero's final resting place. It roots Arthur's myth not in pagan magic but in Christian sacred history. This creates a layered geography where every stone tells multiple stories. A pilgrim in the 12th century could stand in the abbey and look from the tomb of Arthur to the winter-flowering thorn and see a perfect continuum, a divine plan unfolding across centuries. The Celtic otherworld of Avalon and the Christian paradise became one and the same place, connected by a tree that bloomed beyond time. The thorn, in this light, is more than a relic. It is the silent, living witness to the moment when British history and British myth were deliberately and inseparably fused together. Yet even the most enduring legend must eventually face the cold, clear lens of modern science. In recent decades, researchers have turned a new kind of eye toward the Holy Thorn, not to measure its faith, but to sequence its very DNA. The question is simple and revolutionary. Can genetics finally solve this 1,000-year-old mystery? Botanists and geneticists have indeed taken samples from the Glastonbury thorn lineage. carefully collecting leaves and twigs from trees like the one at St. John's Church. Their goal is to create a genetic fingerprint, a unique profile of this particular cultivated variety. They then compare that profile to the DNA of other hawthorn species collected from across Britain, Europe, and crucially, from the eastern Mediterranean region around the Holy Land. What are they looking for? A genetic signature. If the Glastonbury thorn possesses unique markers not found in native British hawthorns, it would strongly suggest an external origin. Even more compelling would be if its DNA showed a close match, a familial kinship with hawthorn populations growing in places like Lebanon, Turkey, or Israel. Such a link would provide powerful, tangible evidence for the theory that the original cutting or seed was indeed brought to Britain from the Levant, perhaps by a pilgrim, a trader, or a crusader returning home. It would move the story from pure myth into the realm of historical possibility. A Middle Eastern origin would not, of course, prove that Joseph of Arimathea was the one who carried it. Genetics cannot name a specific first-century man, but it could dramatically reshape the landscape of the debate. It would transform the legend from an impossible fairy tale into a story grounded in a demonstrable physical journey. The narrative of a holy plant traveling from the east to Somerset would shift from a matter of faith to a plausible historical event, making the ancient tales feel startlingly close to the truth. Yet science here meets its own formidable limits. The very nature of the thorn's history complicates the search. These trees are not the original, they are centuries of clones. Each grafting and regrafting over hundreds of years could have introduced subtle genetic shifts or accumulated mutations. More troubling is the possibility of contamination. The Glastonbury thorns have grown for generations in a town full of other common hawthorns. Pollen from local trees could have fertilized the flowers of the holy trees at any point, introducing foreign DNA into their seeds. If a descendant grew from such a seed rather than a pure cutting, its genetic profile would be a hybrid, obscuring its ancestral origins. The perfect, pristine genetic line may have been lost to time and biology long ago. This is the core tension laid bare. Even if science one day announces a definitive link to the Middle East, it will not end the debate for everyone. For some, that data would be the final, satisfying clue, closing the circle on a great historical puzzle. For others, no genetic report could ever capture the essence of what the thorn represents. The believer might ask, what does DNA know of miracles? A match with trees in Israel does not explain why this particular plant blooms at Christmas or why it was planted on that specific hill. Science can trace the journey of the wood, but it is utterly silent on the intention behind it. It can describe a botanical anomaly, but it cannot account for the centuries of hope, devotion, and wonder that have crystallized around that anomaly. In the end, the genetic analysis does not choose between science and faith, but reveals how they speak two different and often incompatible languages. One seeks a material origin, the other a spiritual meaning. The thorn, as it always has, exists in the fertile and contested ground between them. That silent dialogue between science and belief was never confined to laboratories or church debates. It spilled out into the wider world, coloring poetry, painting, and the very way a nation saw itself. The holy thorn escaped its roots long ago, blooming again and again in the fertile soil of the British cultural imagination. Its first appearances were in song, woven into the fabric of medieval Christmas carols. One of the oldest, dating back to the 15th century, is simply called the Glastonbury Carol. Its lyrics tell the story directly, singing of how Joseph journeyed over the sea and planted his staff, which then burst into flower. This was not just entertainment, it was communal memory set to music, a way for people who could not read to learn and celebrate their local miracle every holiday season. The carol planted the story in the heart of Christmas tradition, making the thorn as much a part of the festive landscape as holly or ivy. Centuries later, the thorn found a new admirer in the visionary romantic poet William Blake. Though he did not write a poem solely about the tree, Glastonbury and its legends permeate his epic mythological works. In his preface to Milton, a poem, Blake penned the lines that would become the unofficial hymn of England, Jerusalem. And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green, and was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? While not naming Joseph directly, the poem is a direct reference to the legend of Christ visiting Glastonbury with his great-uncle, a story that grew from the Thorn's own myth. Blake's fiery questions transformed the local Somerset tale into a national spiritual quest. The Thorn, in this light, became the proof that the divine had once walked in England, a symbol of a lost, sacred past that the industrial age had buried. Artists, too, were drawn to the potent scene. Throughout the Victorian era and beyond, painters illustrated the moment of the miracle with dramatic flair. Their canvases show an aged, bearded Joseph, often surrounded by his weary followers, thrusting his staff into the ground as angels look on or a heavenly light breaks through the clouds. These images fixed a specific visual identity for the legend, moving it from vague story to a concrete, dramatic tableau. They served as devotional aids, history lessons, and nationalist art all at once, reinforcing the idea of England's blessed origins for a public hungry for romanticized history. But the image of the thorn was never neutral. It was a tool, and its meaning shifted with the needs of the era. In the centuries before the Reformation, it was a distinctly Catholic emblem, a symbol of monastic power and pilgrimage. After the destruction of the abbey, it was carefully repurposed. For royalists and later for Victorian Anglicans, it became a safe symbol of ancient English heritage, a Christian relic stripped of its problematic papal associations. It spoke of a deep, native faith that predated and somehow transcended the later conflicts with Rome. In the 20th and 21st centuries, its meaning has splintered and expanded once more. In New Age and alternative spiritual art, the thorn is often depicted alongside Celtic knots, images of the goddess or the chalice well. Here, it is less a Christian relic and more a universal symbol of mystical energy, a node on the planet's ley line. Its biannual bloom is seen as a pulse of the earth itself. This journey from medieval carol to New Age icon reveals the thorn's extraordinary adaptability. It is a blank screen upon which every generation projects its own hopes, fears, and searches for meaning. The tree itself does not change, but the stories we paint around it are in constant, beautiful flux. It ceased being merely a plant and became a permanent motif, a shorthand for mystery, resilience, and the haunting idea that the landscape itself remembers. This cultural immortality may be its greatest miracle of all, ensuring that even if every physical tree were to vanish, the holy thorn would live on, forever in bloom in the pages of a book, the lines of a song, or the strokes of an artist's brush. Every winter, as Christmas approaches, this ancient story steps out of the history books and into the present day through a living ritual in the churchyard of St. John's. Under the gnarled branches of the oldest surviving holy thorn, a small crowd gathers on a cold December morning. The date is fixed, the 8th of December. At the center of the ceremony stand two figures, the Vicar of Glastonbury and the town mayor, representing the twin pillars of spiritual and civic tradition that have guarded this legend for a millennium. There is a palpable sense of quiet solemnity, a feeling that this is more than a quaint custom, it is an act of stewardship. The vicar offers a short prayer, often asking for blessings upon the royal family and the nation. Then, with great care, the mayor produces a special tool, a polished silver pair of scissors kept solely for this purpose. This is not a casual pruning, it is a ceremonial harvest. The mayor selects a single, perfect sprig, one that already shows the tight, promising buds of its winter bloom. With a precise snip, the cutting is taken. This simple act connects the present moment directly to the medieval monks who first propagated the tree, and beyond them, to the legend of Joseph thrusting his staff into the earth. The chosen sprig is then gently placed inside a protective transparent case, a small reliquary for its journey. From the churchyard, it travels first to the Glastonbury Tourist Information Centre, where it is formally packaged. For decades, its destination was Buckingham Palace, addressed to Her Majesty the Queen. Today, the label reads for His Majesty the King. The package begins its voyage to London, a journey that once took days by horse-drawn coach, but now is completed swiftly by train or courier. Upon arrival at the palace, it is received by the monarch's staff. On Christmas morning, that fragile sprig from Somerset finds its place on the royal breakfast table. It rests among the glittering china and silver, a living, breathing piece of folklore amidst the grandeur of state. Its delicate white blossoms, if they have opened during the journey, are a stark and beautiful contrast to the rich festive decor. This is the culmination of the ritual, the moment where a local legend becomes a national symbol, sitting literally at the right hand of the sovereign. The profound power of this tradition lies in its unbroken continuity. Think of everything that has happened since this custom likely began in the 17th century. The English Civil War saw a king executed and the thorn itself chopped down. The Industrial Revolution transformed the landscape. 2 world wars ravaged Europe. The monarchy has evolved from absolute power to constitutional figurehead. Through all of it, through revolution and reformation, through every social and technological upheaval, a sprig has been cut and sent. This annual gesture is a thread of living green stitched through the heavy tapestry of British history. It represents a stubborn, gentle insistence that some stories are worth preserving, that a connection to a mystical past can coexist with a modern, pragmatic present. The ceremony does not ask the king to believe the legend literally. It simply invites him to accept its symbolic weight, to acknowledge this peculiar, flowering thread in the nation's fabric. In return, the monarchy lends the legend its enduring prestige, protecting it not with laws, but with tradition. It is a silent pact between crown and town, renewed with a snip of silver scissors each December, ensuring that no matter how many times the physical tree is attacked, the idea of the Holy Thorn remains forever in the service of the realm. But the Holy Thorn story was never owned solely by monks and monarchs. In the cottages and farmsteads surrounding Glastonbury, a quieter, more intimate kind of faith grew around the tree, one rooted in the soil of folk magic and local remedy. For the common people who lived in its shadow, the thorn was more than a symbol of apostolic history. It was a source of tangible, protective power. They believed that pieces of this blessed tree carried potent magic. A sliver of its wood, carved into a small cross or worn in a pouch, was thought to be a powerful amulet against evil spirits and misfortune. Its leaves and blossoms, particularly those from the miraculous winter flowering, were carefully collected. These were not simply souvenirs, they were ingredients. Steeped in water to create a wash or a tea, they were used in folk remedies to treat fevers, ward off sickness, or ease the pains of childbirth. In a world without modern medicine, where illness was often seen as a spiritual affliction, a cure from a divinely touched plant held profound logic. The thorn became a pharmacy of faith, its very substance a conduit for healing grace that operated outside the formal channels of the church. This practical magic points to a deeper, older layer of belief. The thorn's most famous trait, its winter bloom, did not arrive with Christianity into a blank slate. The ancient peoples of Britain, the Celts who inhabited the Isle of Avalon, already held profound midwinter celebrations. At the solstice, the darkest point of the year, they observed the fragile persistence of life, the promise that light and growth would return. Evergreen plants like holly and ivy were sacred symbols of this enduring life force. When the first Christian missionaries arrived, they often built their churches on pagan holy sites and repurposed local symbols. The Glastonbury thorn, flowering inexplicably at this exact darkest time, was a gift to this process. Here was a native tree performing the ultimate midwinter miracle on its own. The Christian narrative of Christ's birth as the light entering the world fit perfectly over the older, earthy celebration of the Son's return. The thorn became the perfect bridge, a natural symbol that allowed the new religion to grow from the roots of the old, making the spiritual landscape familiar even as its stories changed. This folk layer reveals the thorn's true resilience. Its power came not just from top-down decree, but from bottom-up belief. For the local people, it was a neighbor with supernatural utility, a piece of the landscape that listened and responded to their daily fears and hopes. It belonged to the realm of whispered charms and kitchen table cures as much as to grand abbey processions. This dual existence made it unshakable. The church could control its official story, but it could never control the private faith of a mother placing a thorn-carved charm in her child's cradle, or a farmer hanging a sprig in his barn to protect his livestock. The Holy Thorn was thus woven into the very fabric of everyday life, its roots reaching deep into a stratum of belief far older and more personal than any parchment or papal bull. This intimate connection may explain why, even after the abbey fell and the monarchy's link became ceremonial, the people of Glastonbury never let their tree die. They preserved its cuttings in their gardens, not just as historical curiosities, but as living guardians, keeping a piece of the old magic alive for generations yet to come. Yet for a new generation of seekers, the thorn's deepest roots tap into a far older wellspring of magic. Walk through Glastonbury today, and you will encounter a vibrant, modern spirituality that sees the Holy Thorn not as a Christian relic, but as a living emblem of the goddess and the ancient spirit of Avalon. In the bookshops and crystal stores that line the high street, images of the thorn are often depicted alongside Celtic knotwork, depictions of the triple goddess or the symbolic chalice well. Here, the story of Joseph of Arimathea is just one layer in a much older tapestry. For many in the New Age and contemporary pagan communities, the thorn is a sacred tree in its own right, a being of immense power that predates any single religion. Its miraculous winter flowering is seen not as a sign of Christ's birth, but as a celebration of the solar cycle, a defiant spark of life at the darkest point of the year, perfectly aligned with the pagan celebration of Yule. This represents a profound reinterpretation, a symbolic liberation. The thorn is detached from its specific Christian narrative and re-enchanted as a universal symbol of resilience, natural magic, and the enduring feminine principle often associated with the Isle of Avalon. This mystical geography is mapped not by scripture but by invisible lines of energy. A central belief for many is that Glastonbury sits at a powerful confluence of ley lines, those hypothetical channels of earth energy said to crisscross the landscape. Specifically, two major alignments are believed to intersect at the base of the Tor, the St. Michael Line and the Mary Line. The St. Michael Line is said to be a masculine, active energy, connecting sites dedicated to the Archangel across southern England. The Mary Line represents a feminine, receptive energy, linking ancient holy wells and goddess sites. Where they cross, the energy is believed to be immensely potent, a vortex of spiritual power. And where is the Glastonbury thorn often situated? Directly on this sacred crossroads. The descendant thorns, particularly those near the Tor and Chalice Well, are thus seen as natural antennae, drawing up and radiating this telluric energy. They become living markers on a psychic map, their health and blooming interpreted as signs of the Earth's own vitality. This leads to ceremonies of a completely different nature. You might witness a small group gathered in a quiet garden at dusk, not with prayer books but with drums, candles, and offerings of honey or cider. They circle a holy thorn, perhaps tying small, colorful ribbons or petitions to its branches, a practice known as clootie tying found in Celtic traditions. They may chant, meditate, or simply place their hands on its bark, seeking to connect with the tree's spirit or channel the energy of the land. In these moments, the thorn is honored as a wise elder, a guardian of the location's deep memory. It is thanked, asked for guidance, and treated as a conscious participant in ritual. This nature-based veneration shares a formal similarity with medieval pilgrimage, the act of journeying to touch a sacred object, but its intent is worlds apart. The goal is not salvation through Christ, but harmony with the earth, personal healing, or connection to a generalized divine feminine. This modern adoption is a testament to the symbol's raw, adaptable power. The thorn has been successfully translated into a new spiritual language without losing its essential magnetism. It proves that the human need for sacred landmarks is timeless, even if the stories we tell about them change. A medieval monk would be bewildered by a goddess ceremony at the foot of the tree, but he would undoubtedly recognize the reverence in their eyes, the desire to commune with something greater through this living thing. The thorn endures because it offers itself as a blank slate, a natural wonder upon which every era inscribes its deepest hopes. It asks not for a specific creed, but simply for wonder. And in that space of shared awe, perhaps all the different stories, from Joseph's staff to the goddess's bower, are not in conflict, but are simply different petals on the same resilient, winter-flowering bloom. But such a powerful symbol inevitably invites the sharpest scrutiny. The historian's lens, when turned on the Holy Thorn, reveals a story that may be less about divine intervention and more about brilliant medieval public relations. The central pillar of the entire legend, the journey of Joseph of Arimathea to Britain, stands on remarkably shaky historical ground. No contemporary Roman records, no early British chronicles, not even the writings of the venerable Saint Bede in the 8th century make any mention of such a voyage. The first written account linking Joseph to Glastonbury appears only in the early 12th century, a full 1,000 years after the events it describes. This enormous gap is a red flag for any scholar. It suggests the story was not a preserved memory, but a later invention, crafted precisely when Glastonbury Abbey needed it most. That need was both spiritual and spectacularly financial. By the 12th century, pilgrimage was the lifeblood of a great monastery. Sites that possessed powerful relics attracted thousands of devoted visitors, each leaving donations, purchasing badges, and requiring food and lodging. It was a spiritual tourism economy, and competition between abbeys was fierce. Glastonbury, though ancient and wealthy, lacked a truly blockbuster relic, a direct connection to the foundational moments of Christianity. They had saints, but so did everyone else. What they needed was an origin story that could not be topped. And so, the theory goes, the monks looked at their ancient site, their unusual winter-flowering thorn tree, and a figure from the Bible who was conveniently unattached to any other shrine. They wove these threads together into a masterstroke. Joseph of Arimathea, the man who buried Jesus, was given a new mission, a journey to the very edge of the known world, carrying the faith to Britain long before St. Augustine. His staff, blooming on Wearyall Hill, provided the physical proof. It was the perfect founding myth, granting Glastonbury an apostolic prestige that dwarfed every other church in England. The thorn itself fits neatly into this theory as a fortunate accident. Botanists agree the Crataegus monogyna Biflora is a natural, if rare, variant. The monks, keen observers of their land, would have noticed this peculiar tree that flowered twice. Instead of seeing a simple quirk of nature, they recognized an opportunity. A tree that blooms in the dead of winter near Christmas is a ready-made miracle waiting for a story. They provided the story, grafting it onto a pre-existing local reverence for the site. This was not unique to Glastonbury. Across medieval Europe, the motif of a saint's staff taking root is a common folklore trope. In Brittany, the staff of Saint Corentin is said to have blossomed. In Germany, similar tales are told of Saint Boniface. These stories served as divine land claims, marking territory as blessed. The Glastonbury monks were likely adapting a well-known narrative template, customizing it with their local botanical curiosity and a biblical figure of unimpeachable stature to create the ultimate pilgrimage draw. From this skeptical perspective, the Holy Thorn is not a living relic but a medieval marketing triumph, one of the most successful branding campaigns in history. The abbey's wealth and influence soared after the legend took hold. Pilgrims flocked to see the tree and visit the tomb of King Arthur, another lucrative invention from the same era. The winter-flowering hawthorn was the centerpiece of this spiritual theme park, a natural wonder expertly framed to inspire awe and, crucially, open purse strings. This view does not diminish the thorn's cultural importance, but radically recontextualizes it. It becomes a testament not to God's hand, but to human ingenuity, to the power of a well-told story to shape reality for centuries. It asks us to consider whether the true miracle was the blooming tree or the astonishing, enduring power of the myth that grew around it. Perhaps the most famous of these continental cousins was the Holy Thorn of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. Its legend was direct and agonizingly potent. It was said to be a direct cutting from the original crown of thorns itself, a relic brought to Paris by King Louis IX in the 13th century and housed in the breathtaking Sainte-Chapelle. This particular tree, nurtured within the cathedral close, was venerated for centuries. Its story lacked a founding saint like Joseph, but it compensated with brutal immediacy, a tangible piece of the very instrument of the Passion growing in the heart of a great capital. Another English example grows in the quiet village of St. Briavels in the Forest of Dean. Here, the legend is more localized and practical. It tells of a medieval knight returning weary from the Crusades who thrust his own thornwood staff into the ground. Like Joseph's, it took root and flowered, marking the site where he decided to build a chapel. This story mirrors Glastonbury's in its structure, but operates on a smaller, human scale, a personal miracle for a community rather than a national foundation myth. These parallel tales reveal a crucial pattern. The motif of a holy staff blossoming into a thorn tree was a common folklore template across medieval Europe. It was a ready-made divine sign, a way to sanctify a new church or shrine by linking it to a miraculous act of foundation. This was part of a vast, interconnected economy of sacred botany, where unusual trees were not just admired but actively recruited into religious narratives. Their unique traits, like winter flowering, were interpreted as heavenly signatures, proof that God had marked that spot. Glastonbury's monks were not inventing in a vacuum, they were participating in a widespread cultural language of relic making. What sets the Glastonbury thorn apart, then, is not the structure of its story, but the sheer scale of its success and the depth of its roots. While the Notre Dame thorn was a satellite of a greater relic and the St. Briavels thorn a local wonder, the Glastonbury specimen became the central character in its own epic. Its legend was ambitious enough to explain the very origins of Christianity in Britain. It was tied not just to a chapel or a cathedral, but to the fate of a kingdom woven into the myths of King Arthur and later adopted by the monarchy itself. The others remained religious curiosities, but the Glastonbury thorn evolved into a national symbol. Its endurance speaks to a unique alchemy of place, narrative, and timing, where a good story met a receptive landscape and a powerful institution willing to nurture it for 1,000 years. That cycle of destruction and renewal places an immense burden on a small group of dedicated custodians. Preserving the Holy Thorn is no longer a matter of passive tradition, but an active, ongoing battle against a host of modern threats. The people who care for these trees are not just gardeners, they are historians, geneticists, and guardians of a living heritage. Their work is a quiet, determined effort to outsmart time, malice, and a changing world. One of the most organized efforts is the Glastonbury Thorn Project, a collaboration between local historians, horticultural experts, and community volunteers. Their mission is straightforward in goal but complex in execution: to ensure the genetic lineage of the Glastonbury thorn survives for centuries to come. This is not about planting any hawthorn. It is about preserving the specific genetic code of the Biflora variety that has been part of this story for so long. Their first and most vital tool is the ancient technique of propagation. Every few years, experts take careful cuttings or scions from the healthiest and most authentic descendant trees, like the venerable thorn in St. John's churchyard. These are not random snips, they are surgical selections, choosing new growth that carries the true flowering habit. The scions are then grafted onto sturdy rootstock of common hawthorn. This process is a form of botanical time travel. The rootstock provides a strong, disease-resistant foundation, while the grafted scion grows into a branch that is genetically identical to the ancient parent tree. It is a clone, a perfect copy, ensuring that the new tree will bloom at Christmas just as its ancestors did. These young grafts are then nurtured in protected, often secret locations. Some are grown in private, guarded gardens. Others are given to trusted institutions or planted in less publicly accessible areas of Glastonbury. The strategy is one of deliberate dispersal. By creating a scattered, resilient network of genetically identical trees, the project ensures that no single act of vandalism or disaster can wipe out the lineage. It is a living archive, a safety net woven from branches and buds, yet the gardener's work is constantly challenged by forces beyond human control. Disease is a silent, creeping threat. Hawthorns are susceptible to fungal infections like fire blight and cedar apple rust, which can devastate entire trees. Climate change presents a more insidious danger. The thorn's legendary winter bloom is triggered by a specific pattern of autumn chill followed by a mild spell. As winters become warmer and more erratic, that delicate trigger is disrupted. A tree might bloom too early and have its flowers killed by a later frost, or it might not bloom at all in a persistently warm December. The very miracle that defines the tree is becoming less reliable, a sign that the environmental context for the legend is shifting beneath our feet. Even the love of visitors poses a risk. Well-meaning pilgrims might strip bark for souvenirs, compact the soil around the roots, or accidentally introduce pathogens. Every protective cage built around a young tree is a necessary but sad symbol of this tension, a barrier between a living legend and the very people who wish to venerate it. The work of these custodians is a profound act of faith in the future. They graft water and protect not for themselves, but for generations they will never meet. In doing so, they are redefining what it means to preserve history. They are not simply restoring a stone wall or conserving a parchment. They are keeping a heartbeat alive, one careful cut, one tender shoot at a time. They understand that the true relic is not the wood, but the genetic whisper within it, and they are committed to ensuring that whisper is never silenced. At its heart, the Glastonbury thorn is a living contradiction. It carries within its very name a duality of meaning, a tension between suffering and salvation that lies at the core of Christian symbolism. To understand its power, we must untangle these threads. In the Bible, the thorn first appears not as a blessing, but as a curse. In the book of Genesis, after Adam and Eve disobey God, the ground itself is cursed because of them. God declares, "Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you." Here, the thorn becomes an emblem of the fallen world, of struggle, pain, and the separation between humanity and paradise. It is a sign of labor and sorrow, sprouting from the earth as a constant, prickly reminder of a broken relationship. This symbolism deepens devastatingly in the New Testament during the Passion of Christ. Roman soldiers, in an act of cruel mockery, twist branches into a crown and press it onto Jesus' head. This crown of thorns is the ultimate fusion of the symbol with suffering. It represents not just the general curse of Genesis, but the specific, brutal agony of the crucifixion. The thorn here is an instrument of torture, a weapon of humiliation that draws blood. It embodies the weight of sin and the price of redemption, pressed into the very brow of the Savior. So how does a plant so saturated with imagery of curse and pain transform into a symbol of miraculous hope? The answer is in the resurrection and in the strange logic of grace. In Christian theology, God's pattern is one of reversal and redemption. The instrument of death becomes the means of life. The cross, a tool of execution, becomes the tree of salvation. The Glastonbury thorn performs this exact symbolic alchemy. It takes the emblem of the curse, the thorn, and makes it bloom. It takes the memory of the crown of thorns and transforms it into a living, flowering crown of glory. The legend of Joseph's staff is the perfect vehicle for this transformation. A simple wooden rod, an object of weariness and journey, is thrust into the cursed earth. Instead of remaining dead wood, it takes root. It does not merely grow, it flowers, and it does so at Christmas in the depths of winter. This is the paradox in living color. From the symbol of pain comes unexpected beauty. From the dead of winter comes defiant life. From the staff of a man associated with burial comes a tree that signifies birth. The thorn becomes a testament to the idea that God can bring life from the very things meant to cause death, that grace can bloom in the most hardened and unlikely ground. This symbolism resonates on a deeply personal level for countless believers. The thorn is not just a historical artifact, it is a mirror for the human experience. Everyone faces their own winters, periods of grief, failure, or despair that feel as barren and cold as a December landscape. The image of the holy thorn, blooming precisely when it should be dormant, offers a powerful metaphor for resilience. It suggests that hope and new life can emerge from seasons of hardship, that faith itself can be a kind of winter flowering. For someone navigating loss or illness, the tree is a tangible reminder that pain does not have the final word. For a community rebuilding after a tragedy, its repeated regrowth after vandalism is a lesson in stubborn endurance. The thorn teaches that what appears dead may only be dormant, waiting for the right conditions to show life again. It embodies the quiet, persistent hope that even from the crown of thorns pressed upon our lives, a blossom of meaning and grace can eventually open. This is why the legend endures beyond historical debate or botanical analysis. It speaks to a universal human longing for redemption, for the assurance that our struggles are not pointless but can be transformed into something beautiful. The Glastonbury thorn stands as a permanent, flowering yes to that longing, a natural sermon written in bark and blossom, preaching that even from the wood of the curse, a miracle can grow. The legend does not sleep in history books, it breathes in the whispered stories of those who visit today. For every skeptic analyzing its genetics, there is a pilgrim who arrives with a quieter hope, seeking not proof but an encounter. These modern accounts form a new layer of the thorn's story, one written in personal moments of awe and unexplained happenstance. Visitors often speak of a profound stillness that descends when they stand before one of the descendant trees, particularly the ancient specimen in St. John's churchyard. They describe a sudden hush, as if the noise of the town fades away, replaced by a palpable sense of peace. This feeling, difficult to quantify and deeply personal, is the essence of what scholars call the numinous, the overwhelming sense of the sacred that transcends doctrine. The thorn, for these individuals, operates as a direct channel to that feeling, a living object that facilitates a personal, transcendent experience. Among the most common contemporary stories are those of healing. These are not the grand, medieval miracles of sight restored to the blind, but quieter, more personal restorations. A woman from London recounts visiting the thorn during a period of deep grief after losing a parent. She sat by the tree for an hour, not praying in any formal sense, but simply being present. She describes a warmth spreading through her, not a physical heat, but an emotional unclenching, a sense that her burden was being shared and lightened. She left feeling a resilience she hadn't known was possible, a fragile bloom of hope in her own winter. A man from Bristol tells of bringing a cutting, legally obtained from a propagated tree, to his home in the city. Despite following every horticultural instruction, the cutting wilted and refused to take root. On a whim, during a return trip to Glastonbury, he planted the seemingly dead twig in a quiet corner of the Chalice Well Gardens. Within weeks, it showed green shoots. To him, this was a clear message, the tree itself choosing where it belonged, asserting its connection to that specific, charged landscape. These stories are shared in online forums, in quiet conversations at B&BS, and in the visitor books of sacred sites. They are offered not as evidence for a court, but as testimony for the heart. The timing of the winter bloom itself continues to generate whispers of significance. While the tree flowers most years, there are particular instances where its schedule feels eerily symbolic. Locals and regular pilgrims note years when the blossoms appeared unusually early and abundant, coinciding with times of communal anxiety or global uncertainty, as if the tree was offering a visual comfort. Others point to years when the bloom was late but spectacular, aligning with important local festivals or anniversaries of the town's history. The most poignant accounts involve individual stories where someone praying for a sign during a personal crisis visits the thorn to find it in full, unexpected flower on a cold December day, a private answer to an unspoken question. These occurrences resist scientific explanation, as weather patterns alone cannot account for the deeply personal resonance they hold. To present these anecdotes is not to argue for their objective reality, but to acknowledge their powerful subjective truth. The thorn's enduring power lies precisely in this ability to generate such experiences. It functions as a mirror, reflecting back the hopes and needs of those who approach it. For one person, it is a botanical wonder; for another, a historical artifact; and for another, a living touchstone of the divine. The modern miracles attributed to it are less about the tree performing supernatural tricks and more about its capacity to focus human intention and emotion, to become a catalyst for inner change. In an age of cynicism and noise, the thorn offers a silent, rooted space where wonder is still permissible, where the line between the physical and the spiritual feels beautifully, tantalizingly thin. This ongoing dialogue between the ancient tree and the modern seeker ensures the legend is never finished, but is continually rewritten in the language of personal awe. Walk through Glastonbury on a summer afternoon, and you are stepping into a living museum of belief. The air itself seems layered, thick with the scent of incense from one shop and fresh scones from the next. On the high street, the architecture tells the story in stone. The sturdy tower of St. John's Church, home to an ancient thorn, looks down a lane where shop windows glitter with quartz crystals, tarot cards, and statues of the goddess. A Christian bookshop selling Bibles and Jerusalem hymnals might stand directly beside a store offering aura readings and handmade witch bottles. In between, cozy tea rooms buzz with chatter, their tables occupied by people wearing everything from clerical collars and hiking boots to flowing velvet robes and pentacle jewelry. This is not a staged theme park. It is an authentic, slightly chaotic, and utterly unique collision of worlds. The visitors moving through this landscape are on journeys of their own. You will see Anglican pilgrims, often in quiet groups, following a trail of holy sites. They pause at the abbey ruins for prayer, then walk to St. John's to see and perhaps touch the old thorn, viewing it through the lens of a 2,000-year-old tradition. Nearby, a New Age seeker might be performing a different kind of pilgrimage. They have come to feel the energy of the tour, to drink from the chalice well, and to visit the same thorn tree, not as a Christian relic, but as a powerful nature spirit, a living embodiment of Avalon's magic. They might tie a colored ribbon to its protective cage as a prayer or an offering, a practice with roots in Celtic folk tradition. Then there are the history tourists, guidebooks in hand, trying to untangle the Arthurian legends from the monastic history. They examine the thorn with a curious, analytical eye, a piece of a historical puzzle. And weaving through them all are the simply curious day trippers drawn by the town's famous weirdness, snapping photos of the eclectic shopfronts and the majestic tour. Despite their vastly different motivations, all these paths converge at a few key points. The Holy Thorn is one of the most powerful. It is the one landmark that holds a place of reverence in every single map of Glastonbury, whether that map is spiritual, historical, or purely aesthetic. For the Christian pilgrim, it is a living witness to the faith's arrival in Britain. For the pagan seeker, it is a sacred tree marking a powerful ley line intersection. For the historian, it is a centuries-old botanical specimen around which a national myth was built. They may all be looking at the same tree, but they are seeing entirely different things reflected in its branches. This creates a fascinating, often unspoken tension. You can sense it in the polite but distant nods between visitors at the thorn's enclosure, or in the subtly different descriptions offered by competing tour guides. Yet, remarkably, this tension rarely boils over into conflict. Instead, it settles into a kind of respectful coexistence, a shared understanding that this place is bigger than any one interpretation. The thorn itself becomes a neutral territory, a silent mediator. Its very existence, rooted and persistent, seems to remind everyone that they are guests in a story much older than themselves. The town economically depends on this entire ecosystem. The B&B that hosts a retreat for Anglican clergy also welcomes the couple attending a goddess conference. The cafe serves cream tea to the walking tour group and the solitary crystal healer alike. Glastonbury has learned to metabolize its own contradictions, to build a community where the mystical and the mundane, the ancient and the modern, are not at war but in constant creative conversation. In this bustling, noisy, fragrant mix, the Holy Thorn stands quiet. It does not preach a single doctrine, it simply is. And in its silent, seasonal blooming, it offers the same gift to everyone who seeks it out, a moment of pause, a touch of wonder, and a tangible connection to something that feels profoundly old. It asks for no agreement, only attention, and in a fractured world, that might be the most unifying miracle of all. The story of the Glastonbury thorn is a thorn in the side of history itself, a persistent, prickly mystery that refuses to be neatly solved. It is a journey that begins with a single, symbolic thrust into the earth, a saint's staff planted in legend. From that moment, the narrative grew, twisting and branching through the centuries like the tree's own roots. It became a botanical wonder, a unique flowering quirk of nature that defied the seasons. It transformed into a political pawn, a living relic used to sanctify a king's authority and a monastery's wealth. It faced the axe of Puritan fury, becoming a vandalized stump, a martyr to iconoclasm. And yet, time and again, it returned, a living symbol reborn from cuttings and cuttings of faith, cloned and protected by generations of quiet custodians. The true power of the Holy Thorn of Glastonbury was never locked in its wood or its winter blossom. Its magic lies in its unparalleled ability to be many things to many people across 1,000 years. For the medieval monk, it was proof of divine favor, a living charter for his abbey's supremacy. For the Tudor king, it was a symbol of ancient lineage, a sprig of sacred history on his Christmas table. For the Puritan soldier, it was an idol to be destroyed. For the modern pilgrim, it might be a focus for Christian devotion, a node of earth energy, or simply a beautiful, stubborn piece of a very old story. It embodies faith, inspires devotion, provokes controversy, and connects us, through awe, through curiosity, even through anger, to a deep and layered past. It is a mirror held up to every era, reflecting back our changing hopes, fears, and ways of seeing the world. The question at the heart of it all remains. Was this a divine sign, a miraculous marker planted by a follower of Christ to hallow England's green and pleasant land? Or was it a cunning legend, a masterstroke of medieval marketing built around a fortunate botanical accident? The evidence, like the tree's own gnarled trunk, points in both directions. Science can trace a possible journey from the Levant, but cannot explain the intention. History can document the legend's convenient timing, but cannot measure the depth of the wonder it sparked. Perhaps in the end, the search for a single, simple answer misses the point entirely. The thorn's greatest lesson is that some stories are too potent, too human, to be confined by categories of true or false. It is a story that is, like the tree itself, constantly flowering anew in the imagination of each new generation. It invites us not to a verdict, but to a conversation with history. So what do you think, divine sign or cunning legend? The roots of the debate run as deep as the legend itself. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and for more journeys into history's greatest mysteries, don't forget to subscribe.